Okay, so we're learning Likkutei Sichot Volume 1 for Parshas Lecha. This is the second installment. And so we ended with the fact that there's a paradox in the Neshama coming down. He said, on the one hand, it's a great descent, and today he's going to show us how great this descent is in 4, even 5 different areas. The descent comes for the soul when it comes down into the body. And in that respect, it's against the soul's will. And so he's going to start, first of all, with the descent of the will, because if you're saying that it's against the soul's will, so you have to show me that the will actually was coerced to come down into a lower state. And we have to also give a little bit of explanation, which he doesn't hear. Yeah, that's what it says, that you're alive against your will. On the other hand, in spite of the great descent, the soul wants this. Why? Because Yiridat Tzorech Aliyah. So there's this new principle that going down is in order to come up. Now, even before we start, we have to see how opposite this is from how we see the world. We don't see descent as, like normally if I would ask someone, we wouldn't say descent is for the sake of ascent. Most people just see descent as descent. Like when you go down, and that's the end of it. Like, why would it be for an ascent? So, locked into that, or hidden, sort of hidden within that statement, that this descent is for the sake of an ascent, is our general feeling about nature. That nature conceals God. So for us, what we call descent is actually an ascent. If it conceals God, it is actually doing the opposite from what it seems. And that's a big principle in Jewish mysticism. In general, in all mysticism, it's like that. But by Yiddishkeit, because we have so much invested in action.
But in Jewish mysticism, they conceal God. In other mysticism, they conceal
nothingness. Right. But because we have so much invested in action, so then it turns out that my actions, even though I'm going down, they're leading to something that's coming up. Now, it's interesting that today this is like an accepted, in a certain sense, this is accepted in the world. Like where did this begin to become accepted? In entrepreneurship. So you had this idea, well, I don't remember who made this popular, but this meme that was going around for a while, like 10 years ago, that behind every successful entrepreneur are many, many failures. That you don't know about this until you actually try to do something in the world. And when you begin to try to do something in the world, you see that there's a lot of false starts. You seem to hit rock bottom, and it's only then that you begin to rise. So and again, this is a principle that somehow is seeped into the regular thinking of the population, like a regular. This is similar to the problem with light. We call light this thing that allows us to navigate the physical world. But this is not the light of God. It's exactly the opposite, because what does it do? It shows us a physical world that conceals God. So that's not light. What are we seeing? We're seeing a degradation of something that was called light in the spiritual world, which allows you to see godliness, which is something completely different. Right? That was the Hayom Yom of yesterday, that the Alter Rebbe gave a bracha to someone. And he said to him, I want to give you wealth as a bracha. He says, I don't want wealth. Wealth is too big a nisayim. So he says, I'm going to give you long life. He says, okay, but on condition that it's not the life of a falach, of a farmer. Why not a farmer, a peasant? Because he says they don't have eyes and they don't have ears. Of course they have eyes and they have ears. They walk around and they till their fields and they make produce and so on. It says they don't have eyes to see God and they don't have ears to see God, because what they see and what they hear is the physical world, and that conceals godliness. So the same thing, the same principle applies to descent. That the normal thinking about descent is that somehow descent is a negative thing. But that's because the world is backwards. The world is upside down. If I would tell you that going down is actually coming up, right? If the world was flipped over, so then Yiridat Tzorech Aliyah means really, it's not just that it's leading to the ascent that will come later. It's actually the ascent. It's almost like you fall down and suddenly it flips over and you see that you're actually going up. Like you didn't understand that before until you actually fell down and went all the way down to the bottom. And then it flipped over. There's a popular science fiction series now called Stranger Things. Whatever, you have to have friends who know. I have a friend who just gave a 10-part series or something like that on the Kabbalah of Stranger Things. Whatever, anyway. So one of the things that he showed me was that they did this. I'm sure this is not the first time anyone did this, but it was like that. There it was the opposite, because they wanted to really like blow your mind, as it were. But it's deeper than that, because they do have the opposite picture. So the person had to climb up a rope, and when he reaches the ceiling, he suddenly finds himself falling down. It's like the world turns upside down. They call it the upside down. But here the picture is exactly the opposite. I'm falling down, and when I hit the bottom, it flips over, and suddenly I see that I've come up. So that's the thinking behind this. Because it's like light. You can't trust up and down. There's a very interesting thing that you can see it very easily. That for this you need a roller coaster, right? And when you're on a roller coaster, what do you feel? You feel that going down is very easy, and going up is very hard, right? So it's sort of like that you drop down, you use the momentum of dropping down to make the climb up. That's maybe as close as you can come to feeling it. And I guess that's why people love roller coasters, because in a certain sense it's preparing them for how the world is really is, and it's going to be revealed soon, that these descents, these drops down, they're just a preparation for the going up. You're like gaining speed in order to make it up the next mountain. Of course, they see it the other way around. They see that in the beginning of the roller coaster, you go up a lot, and then it's just to drop down. So again, it's a backwards thinking. But if you think about it like you should, then when you reach the top of the first mountain, the first height of the roller coaster, and you drop down, it's only in order to make it up to the next mountain. That's really the...
You said, if I understood correctly, you said two different things.
Yes.
You said, like, Aliyah, Aliyah,
right.
Going down is preparation for going up, and then
right.
You also had said that going down actually
is going up.
Is
right.
Going up.
And the only way you can see that in our world is to divide it like into two parts.
One is like parallel. It's two different.
Again, because there's a paradox here. Because as you're going down, you have to think about it. I hit the floor, and suddenly the world flipped over, and now I'm going up. And now I suddenly see that I'm going up.
Similar to what's the Hasoter?
Yeah, Soter Menat Livnot. Yeah, it's very similar, right? You're breaking up energy in order to create something new. Now it's very strange, because why would that even be? You don't get it in here. You're losing all the energy that was in the building. So how is this preparing you for something more? So I guess what you're hitting upon is that locked inside this type of reasoning is the understanding that even though you're breaking something apart, this is really a preparation for the building. Right. Okay, so let's see how he says this. So on the other hand, okay, so we have these two sides, and again, another takeaway, a little bit of a takeaway, is that it's easier to fall down than it is to climb up. That's for sure. But you sort of have to think about these things as like a roller coaster, that you're gaining speed as you go down in order to be able to climb back up. And it's not back up, but like I said, it's like when you hit the bottom, it's not like in a roller coaster that now you go up. It's just that the world flips over, and now you have enough energy to climb. So you have to think about it like that. In our world, the only way to do it is like to go down and then come up. But in the real world, spiritual world, the way it is you're gaining speed, and then you continue through the floor, and then you have the speed to go up, because the world, as it were, flips over, and now you're just going up. So in the real world, it would look like just a linear. Okay, maybe that's what you meant with the linear and breaking it. Again, it's just a necessity of our world that we have to map a lot of dimensions onto something three-dimensional. We have to map the spiritual dimension and the two-dimensional. It's a little hard to do it. In any case, so let's see how he says this. These two sides of the coin here, on the one hand, that it's against the will of the soul to come down into the world, and on the other hand, that it is a great profit for it to come down into the world, they are hinted in the opening verse of our parsha. Go out from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house into the land that I will show you. And now he explains it in 5 different ways. So it's very, I don't know why they did this in the first volume, Likkutei Sichot. This is like advanced Kabbalah. It's like, why would they even, I don't know why. So my guess is that the Rebbe just fixed it. It's how he taught it, and it just remained the way it is. But theoretically, you could have made it a lot simpler by just giving one example. I think that people would have understood, but I guess you need all of them in some way. So, let's see how it is. The first example, the first one has to do with will, the willpower. And we said that it's against its will, so there has to be a descent of the will. How does the will descend? Me'artzecha, from your land. The first, right, there are 3 levels here. Your land, your birthplace, and the house of your father. Your land, kfi she'hanshama b'bchinat ratzon ha'elyon. Aretz means ratzon. Right, that's one of the etymologies that the sages give. That ratzta la'asot ratzon konan, that she wanted to do the will of her creator. So the land reflects will. Which will? The supernal will. Whenever you say supernal will in Kabbalah, you mean partzuf arich. That's given. That's like easy. שזה נעלה יותר מאשר מובא בתניא שהנשמיים בחוכמה עילה, שהוא וחוכמתו אחד, כי רצון נעלה מחוכמה. And he mentions right away something that's very apparent in the Tanya. The Tanya never openly talks about Keter. It never openly talks about the crown. Arich is the lower partzuf of the crown. It's the lower part of the crown. The higher part in Chassidus, which is when it is talked about, the Alter Rebbe talks about it a lot, is what we call ta'anug, atik yomin. So we have ta'anug and ratzon. So here he's talking about the ratzon. The Tanya doesn't go into the Keter. Why? There's a lot of reasons for it. We're not going to get into it now, but he says in the Tanya, all he mentions is chokhmah is the wisdom above. Which wisdom is this? We're talking about the wisdom and, as we'll see, the understanding of the world of Atzilus. That's the way it's usually understood, or within Abba V'Ima Ilayin. We'll see how this works in a second. Because will is higher than wisdom, and the Tanya only talks from wisdom. That's all it mentions, the source of the souls being from wisdom. I'll just say one word, because the Tanya is not interested in the superconscious elements of the soul. The Tanya is interested about taking the conscious elements of the soul and harnessing them towards action. That's what it wants to do. The superconscious elements he doesn't get into almost anywhere. Certainly not openly, he doesn't talk about it. זהו גם מה שאומר בפרקים הבאים, פרק ל"ב, שכולן מתאימות, ואב אחד לכולנה, שכולן מתאימות מצד בחינת רצון, ואב אחד לכולנו מצד בחינת הרצון. So he says, after chapter 2, he does mention, like in hint, like in a small, sort of mentions it, that there are 2 levels that are called in chapter 32, that they are all equal, they're all fitting, all the souls are fitting. That is the way they are in the supernal will. Ve'av echad lekulana, they have one father, that is the chokhmah, that is the wisdom. Okay, this is all very cryptic, because what do you get from this? It's just a description. Now the next 2 stages, we said that was the first stage, me'artzecha, from your
this is the ratzon of the nefesh elokis, that's what we're saying?
Right. It's not even nefesh elokis yet. So this is the soul in general. It's the soul in general. Soul in general. The soul in general has a ratzon. Later on, the nefashot are actually much lower. They're not even like the soul. The soul is embodied in a body that has these 2 nefashos. So this
is like the soul of the soul.
Right. This is like the soul itself. Right. Okay. Then the 2 next stages, from your birthplace and from your father's house. So from Keter it comes down to Chokhmah and Bina. And now he makes it even more complex. He says, your birthplace, place of your birth, that itself is Avim. That itself is father and mother. And Chokhmah is father and Bina is mother. So you have within the birthplace, he says you have both mother and father. And then just the place where you were born, so now he says that is mother and father within Chokhmah. So in any case, the breakdown is simple. Me'artzecha is the will. Mimoladetcha is the father, is the Chokhmah, the wisdom. And Beit Avicha explains Fishan Shema b'bchinat Bina, the way it is in Bina. So we have Keter, Chokhmah, Bina. So what happened? Because Keter was will, so when you came down, So the descent became such that eventually you went down into a place of your birth, into a house of your father, and you might not even know what the original will was. You don't remember it anymore. So that's the descent of the will. It's against your will. Why would the will want to come down into Chokhmah and Bina? Why would it want to descend from such a high place into being like a father and mother? And these are already limited realities. It had a much higher reality. What do we mean? What's an example? So we said we had to somehow explain this a little bit. Before the soul was born, it could be anything. It's sort of like a stem cell. Once Rav Ginsburg gave a whole explanation. I think there's 5 or 6 different levels today of stem cells. The omnipotent, plupotent, like, you look it up. There's like many different stages of stem cells. So it says that neshama, the soul, before it came down into the world, the will included everything. And some people have this for a long time until they settle down in life, that they don't know what they want to do. It's not that they don't know what they want to do; it's that they want to do everything. There's some people that are like that. It used to be possible. There were what do you call it? Poly scientists. There used to be a name for it in the 1700s, 1800s. I don't remember what. A polymath. They used to call it polymath, I think.
Replace it with polysaccharides.
So people that had talents in everything. So that's like a person whose soul didn't really descend down into wisdom and understanding. Why do we say here wisdom and understanding? So the simple explanation would be that even though I have will to be able to be a doctor, to be able to be a scientist, to be able to be a carpenter, to be able to be a teacher, to be able to be all the different professions. I can be a musician, I could be a dancer, I see in myself all these talents are all there. That is in the soul the way it is above, the way it was in the supernal will. Every soul has all these abilities. Every single one of them. That's the meaning of Partzuf Arich. Partzuf Arich in Chassidus means the stockpile, the warehouse of all your talents. Especially those that were never fulfilled in this life. So there's people, when they're younger, they're really confused. They don't know what to do. They have to settle down. So there's a saying in Yiddish, it spins and it spins until it falls down. It's about the dreidel, but it's really about the soul. The soul has to spin and spin and spin until it gets wheezy, and then it falls down. And wherever it falls down, so that's where it starts to lead its life. So there's people there's actually people who never do this, who just go through life never knowing what they need to apply themselves to. So this is obviously a descent. It's what you feel. When you eventually fall down, you fall down. It's sort of like you fall into the world, you fall into your occupation.
Sounds like Sufism.
What?
Sounds like Sufism.
Maybe that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to convince to go back into because the soul can handle it. The soul can handle going around and around and around and around as much as it wants. In fact, the Partzuf Arich is always described, well, Arich itself is maybe a little bit more straight, but the whole keter, the crown, is associated with circles. It's not associated with straight lines. So it's very hard to get the crown to actually fall down. But when you get it to fall down, so the person falls into life, they find an occupation, and then you see that they begin to marginalize all their other options. And they become more and more focused in what they're doing. And that is really the secret of being in this world. And it's a very difficult process. It's not something that happens easily. Today, it might not happen until the person's well into the 3rd decade, sometimes their 4th decade. They don't know yet what they need to focus on. That's the descent of the will. And the descent of the will is ba'al kochacha. It's against your will. Because the will before was able to accomplish everything. I could have done everything. I could have been everything. It doesn't mean that I would be the best painter. But I have painting skills. Not skills, but I have the painting, let's call it the consciousness of a painter. But it never came down. When it came into this body, so the body, the wisdom and the understanding, the brain itself limits what I can possibly achieve with my will. Because I don't have the brain of a painter. I have a brain of a mathematician. It's not going to work. It's just left side, right side. It's not working for me. Whatever it is. So that's the idea of a descent from will to wisdom and understanding. This is his first example of corresponding these words, to a descent. What time is it? You have to end. So God willing, tomorrow we'll pick up the next 4 of these and try to give each one a little bit of an explanation, and then get to the end. But the concept is simple. I think we understood that it's a descent for the sake of ascent. In the end, the descent is against your will, and the ascent is for your will. I just want to mention one more thing. This is also how the world is opposite. The world we live in is the opposite from the real world. Why? Because for us to descend, now let's go back to the roller coaster, but look at something else in the roller coaster. It doesn't take any energy to fall down. It happens naturally. But here it's against your will. What is he saying? That descending is against, meaning that it is hard to descend. It all depends on what you see as up and what you see as down. If your natural state is to be up, then to descend is very hard. So that's what people always feel in life. Nobody wants to go down. Nobody wants to go down in life.
If descending is hard, then going up should be easy.
Right? It is. Afterwards it is. In the real world, in the spiritual world. But in our world, it's the opposite. That falling down is easy, and nobody wants it, but it's very easy. And then going up. And going up is always hard work for us. Okay? But really what he's saying is that in the real world it's the opposite. If you're willing to force yourself to come down into this world, the ascent becomes easy.